We are live on Proline TV for some more NASCAR coverage 2025, heading to Michigan after an okay race at Nashville that we'll talk about in just a little bit as we welcome in CJ Badoon from rotowire.com. How's it going, CJ?
It is going well. Happy to be heading back to Michigan, which usually produces some pretty good races.
Yeah, it does have that capability. So last year's race was rained. They rained it. I think it was after the first stage or something like that. They came back second stage on Monday morning. So we had one of those deals last year. Let's hope that doesn't happen this year. I haven't even checked the weather yet. Maybe we should do that. But yeah, it's a 2-mile track. So hopefully that'll give us some good racing. We'll get into all that in just a little bit. But let's first of all start off with what took place last week in Nashville. And overall, I mean, look, it's a night race, so that's okay. But now, other than that, I mean, the best racing happened right around the midway point when you had Blaney, Byron, and Hamlin. That would have been nice if that was the end. Unfortunately, it came in the middle of the race. And then once Ryan Blaney took over, his pit crew did nothing wrong this time. And as long as they kept bringing him out there in first or second on the restart, that's all he needed. And he had the best car. Nobody could catch him.
Yeah, wasn't much more to it than that. Like you said, the racing was pretty close between Denny Hamlin and William Byron and Blaney in that middle portion. But once Blaney, really got out front, it was really all kind of his to let it go away. And this time the team backed him up. He didn't make any mistakes and was able to drive through to first win for him this season.
What did you think about the track?
The track was good. Concrete is always interesting because you get a little bit of that extra wear on the tires. I think it opened up and enabled some different lines, which is good. I don't think it's as exciting as we saw or will see at Michigan coming up here with the bigger track, wider turns. So I think that cars will have a little bit more opportunity to move up and down the track here at Michigan this week, which will open up some lanes and hopefully get some pretty good racing going on.
Yeah, and we also had a little bit of drama early in the race when Kyle Larson had issues with his car, and that persisted for a while. It wasn't until late that he was able to find his way in the top 10. As a matter of fact, Larson, Bell, Reddick, and you can even throw Wallace in there, even though Wallace is not in the same group as Bell, Larson, and Reddick. But those 4 drivers all had issues early in the race, and then still they were able to find their way into the top 10 anyway. I'm not sure what that says, if it's so great about them, or especially that's a very hard track to pass. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I think Kyle Larson was the one that was most eye-opening, but like you said, Wallace had issues, Reddick had issues. Larson, it looked like his day was basically over. I think they even had the hood up on the car at one point or another. So to see him come back, and he started in 28th position. So right from the green flag, he was way back there, then had problems on top of it. And it wasn't like he just had one problem either. He got pinned up against the wall during another crash with some minimal damage, still was able to persevere through the top 10. And I think that's exactly what these teams need to be doing as you get closer to the playoffs, because every point, every position is going to matter in the 3-race span through advancement. So it's good that they're getting the practice of resiliency right now in these races and figuring out what they need to do to persevere through an entire race and maximize, the best of a bad situation, which those guys definitely did.
I still think it's a little bit silly that when you see like Bowman is like hanging out in his car in the garage like an hour after the incident. It's like, come on. I mean, is this really necessary?
100 laps down. Yeah. So he was classified as running in 36th position, but he only completed 188 laps. So,
like, why did we have to go from like it's like the rules just went like one extreme to another. It was like, we're all right. Well, if you're not out in a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, then you're done. To, oh, you've got all the time in the world to figure it out. Why can't we be like, well, we'll give you 10 minutes. Give it a little bit of balance in there. Because no, I mean, just having these cars sit there for like an hour or two and then come out, come on. I mean, that's just a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
All right. So also, as far as the race was concerned, we had a big run for Carson Hocevar. Now, look, I thought it was funny when he was in the post race and he was talking about it. Like, I don't know, he said something along the lines of being upset about being second or something. It's like, dude, the only reason you were second is because of the way that the green flag pit stops, circulated, and Denny Hamlin, they were going for a caution. I guess they knew they did not have as fast as a car as Blaney. So they figured the best way was let's keep the car out as long as possible. Maybe we'll get a caution. If we do, we're in the driver's seat. If not, well, we should still come out second and maybe we can catch him again with a caution. But he never got out second. He got out third. And he got closer to Hocevar, but just wasn't able to pass him. Look, another 5 or 6 laps, and Hamlin's passing Hocevar. So I don't know what Hocevar is upset about. If anything, I mean, come on. You had your best race ever. Show a little bit of, I know everybody's, that's almost like a new thing for the drivers nowadays. It's like everybody's upset unless they win a race. Come on. I mean, just live in the moment and just be happy that you're second place and that you're a cup driver and everything should be, so good with this, stage of his career.
Yeah, it was an impressive performance from Carson Hocevar. We've been talking about him for a number of weeks. He's been showing flashes of speed and being able to get there at the front, but it was all down to putting an entire race together. And we talk all the time about how that requires the pit crew on pit road to be flawless. It requires the strategy being the right strategy and being called at the right times. And they put all the pieces together in Nashville. He should absolutely be very happy. But you're right. Yeah, race drivers at the top of the game and the top of the series will sit there and say, yeah, second's the first, loser, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's happy and I'm sure that the team is pleased, but they will feel like at some point, based on how they have been running, that at some point this season they can win. And another one, just the opposite side of that coin that was in that same situation, but on the opposite side was Keselowski. So Keselowski was out there waiting for the caution to come, never actually did. He was actually in a pretty decent position, but yet his season-long struggles ended up continuing when the caution just didn't come. He ended up having to pit, lost all the track position, and then wound up 23rd. Ended up being good for him, actually, because, that's not good. Obviously, higher would have been better. But nonetheless, he did make that last spot. If anybody remembers us talking about the in-season tournament, the cutoff for that was actually Nashville. Keselowski took the 32nd spot within that. So they'll spend the next 3 races getting their average finish for seeding, and then we'll have a knockout bracket style racing for the 5 races after that, including Indianapolis. So you get some extra intrigue to watch over these next couple of weeks. But good for Keselowski to be in there. He missed out on probably a top 10 finish because of strategy opposite of Hocevar.
Well, you would think that they would talk a little bit more about this, during this 3 hours that they're on the air, 4 hours on the air. I mean, I don't ever hear about any of this stuff.
I'm not going to complain about the coverage.
It's just, if you're going to put it together, promote it, so, but.
Well, I think it's really, it's all setting the field and then setting the brackets over the next couple of weeks. And really when Prime goes off the air, that's when the knockout style competition happens. And I think that's when they flip to TNT. So probably more.
Oh, so they don't care. Prime
probably
care.
More of a TNT thing than Prime.
Now, as far as trying to figure out this racetrack for next year, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because, and it's interesting because Ford really, as we said last week, really didn't have anything. And then qualifying and practice sure didn't change anything. I mean, you didn't have a Ford in the top 5 in either session. And you only had 1 Ford in the top 14 in final practice. And yet you had Blaney and Logano, who, Blaney obviously was the best car with a Ford, but you also had Logano had a pretty good day. So, I don't know what to take out of that for next year and make things a little bit more harder to figure out manufacturer-wise. But, that was a little bit unusual, even though, especially, by the way, Logano, he was 32nd in final practice. So, for whatever reason, this year, things were a little bit different. in a way, but I don't know if it was more just along the lines of, they made a really good call. Because it was interesting. Remember, we talked about it last week, that one of the issues that even though Blaney finished sixth or something like that last year, or whatever he finished, that he led laps, but they made they made some bad strategy. And I don't remember what it was, but we talked about it because I remember I had it in my notes. Well, they turned around and had a great strategy on Sunday night, and it worked out in their favor and really put them in a great position. Now, I don't know if Blaney wouldn't have made things up anyway because he was that fast, but still, that really changed everything after they were pretty far back to begin with. And that two-tire strategy really put him in good position. So either way, I guess that's something for us next year, but still a little bit strange that Ford actually came away with the dominating win, considering they hadn't done mostly anything. We know Logano won last year, but that was kind of fluky because, as we showed you last week, all the weird cautions and 30 extra laps or whatever it was, and then the slow times on Saturday.
Yeah, Ford only had 2 cars in the top 10, though. So it's not like it was a complete reversal of the trends. You had Blaney and Logano that were up there. What was interesting as well was within the top 10, half of the top 10 started inside the top 10. The other half that finished in the top 10 didn't start in the top 10, actually started like 12th and further back. So you had 2 guys that came up from starting outside the top 20 to finish inside the top 10. Those were Carson Hocevar and Kyle Larson. But the majority of the faster cars throughout the day, aside from Blaney, really were the Chevrolets and Toyotas anyway. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with temperature. Last year was in the afternoon. This year, or last week, was in the evening. So a concrete track, really sensitive to temperature and can really affect the tire wear. And I think that probably ended up helping the Penske cars.
So was this the only year it was in night?
I believe it was in the afternoon last year. Yeah.
Oh,
let me
okay.
check. Just to be certain, I'm almost positive because I remember them complaining about how hot it was.
Okay, well, that's definitely something that we'll put together for next year because, yeah, I mean, hey, they got the lights. You might as well use them, even though we were wondering, what are you doing with a night race on a Sunday? I'm not sure why they just couldn't do it on Saturday night. I mean, there's nothing going on a Saturday night this time of year.
Exactly right. Last year, the Nashville race was actually later in the year. It was June 30th, and it was at 3:30 in the afternoon. So, again, sweltering hot, that part of the country, late June afternoon. So moving it to the night, temperature differential probably had a lot to do with Ford doing better.
Interesting. I'll definitely make a note of that. Okay, so let's take a look at Michigan. And first of all, the trends. Again, 2-mile track, the only 2-mile track. So we used to have California, and now we're still waiting on that. When is that new track or the new configuration coming?
It's been a couple months since I've seen any news on it. I thought that. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to look up again to see when the targeted completion date is, and I can't remember. Did they actually fully decide to go with a short track?
I think that's where we left off.
Yeah, I think so. I'll have to look that up. Maybe we can talk about it next week or something.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, we don't have a whole lot to go on as far as track comparisons. It's just not a lot. So we're not going to really be able to do that. So we just go to Michigan, and we have a significant manufacturer trend. And that is the fact that Ford, speaking of them not doing well, even though they've won now the last 2 races at Nashville, has been the dominant manufacturer at Michigan. They had a 9-race win streak snapped last year, even though 5 of those wins were by Harvick. But they had a 9-race win streak snapped. Reddick won the race. Now, we'll get into how he won it. But Chevy has not won now since 2017. That is crazy. Chevy has not won a race at a track since 2017. As far as starting position, you do want to start up front. Last 19 winners, 14 of them started in the top 10. And then we've also had 12 straight, with 12 of the 14. So 14 out of 19, top 10, 12 out of the 14 started in the top 2 rows. 6 of those pole sitters. but no pole sitters in the last 7, meaning we haven't had a pole sitter since next gen. So we've only had 3 next gen races. So yeah, again, it's only been 3 next gens, and 1 Toyota did win. The other 2 were Fords. So I guess it's still kind of maybe a little bit too early to say that we're just going to discount all Chevys. We're not going to do that. But it is, it's a big enough trend to note that this is not the week to really go heavy on Chevy. Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
put that on the thumbnail. Don't go heavy on Chevy.
It would be appropriate. Looking at this race from last year, though, Ryan Blaney won the first stage, so you had a Ford there early. Kyle Busch and Chevrolet won the second stage. By the time we got to the end of the race, this one went to overtime. It was Reddick's. I think Reddick was in the lead, and then Byron challenged him in the overtime restarts, if I'm not mistaken, and then Reddick ended up coming out top. So I think all that to say that this race could end up being very competitive. And I honestly wouldn't discount any of the manufacturers, despite the fact that Chevy hasn't won recently, because William Byron was close to winning last year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Probably should have won. Matter of fact, I think the only reason he didn't win in the overtime session was because he didn't get pushed properly. And I think he came out first because I believe, is it the outside lane that works better at Michigan on the restart?
I believe so, because you can hold the momentum on the top line, and it's all about getting down that long back straight with the draft. So if you don't have somebody really pushing you and really close to you, you lose out on the benefit of the draft on the long straightaway. This is such a big track like Daytona and Talladega that the draft really does come into play, and being able to have that push and pull will make a big difference over a short run.
Yeah. So, and it might have been Keselowski, but someone did not get a good start. So Byron was all by himself. Reddick got a good push, took the lead, and that was it. Byron came pretty close to get back. He got right behind Reddick at the end, but he just couldn't get him. So yeah, I thought, a great point. It looked like Byron did have, even though Reddick was leading the race when the caution came out, or he would have won. But let's also keep in mind that Reddick kind of was it did like a Keselowski Bowman kind of stealing the race. He didn't really do much. He was hanging around the top 10, just had something with the last 15 or so laps, or however it was, 10 laps, and that was it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's pop up the odds here.
While you're doing that, actually, Reddick did not finish in the stage points in either of the first two stages in that race. He did lead 15 laps at the end and ended up winning. Did start on the front row, though, but I don't see him as capturing any stage points in the first 2 segments that day.
Okay. Hey, what a big surprise there. Kyle Larson's the favorite.
No surprise.
He is. Hey, he is plus 550. So, yeah. Yeah, Kyle is definitely going through something the past couple of weeks because I don't think you could call this a coincidence that in the last couple of weeks, the last 2 races, ever since he left the Brickyard, he had trouble at the Coke 600. And then again, as you mentioned, when does Kyle Larson start? What did he start again last week? 27th or something?
28th, I think, yeah.
And it was practice speed wasn't much better, I believe. I mean, when does this happen to Kyle Larson? And then he has the issue in the race. I'm sorry, but that is not a coincidence. This is why he's got to make up his mind what he wants to do. Look, we all know he's going to the playoffs anyway, and it's not going to really affect him winning a championship. So that's up to him. But yeah, I mean, that's something that you have to keep an eye on. Even though he came back and got a top 10, you got to keep an eye on that and wonder whether or not this is a good time to take him. Yeah,
I agree. He's got a pretty good record here. Obviously 3 wins. None of those were in the next gen car, but in the next gen car, he has finishes of 7th and 5th. And then last year he crashed out. He led 41 laps. Started from the 4th position, so probably would have been there with Byron and Reddick in the end if he had been able to make it. But that's the story of Kyle Larson. He's up and he's down. He crashes, he has problems, or he wins. It's kind of one or the other. And I think looking at him in comparison to Denny Hamlin, number one, is on the right trajectory, whereas Kyle Larson, as you mentioned, the past couple of weeks is not. Denny Hamlin's kind of the opposite direction. He's actually getting out there and fighting for the lead on a consistent basis. And then when you look at his record at Michigan, even just recently, it's terribly impressive. He's a two-time winner at the track. He hasn't finished outside of the top 10 since 2019 at the track. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the last 7 finishes were all top 5s, a number of those second or third place finishes. So I think Denny Hamlin brings some consistency and safety, and you're getting better odds for him. You don't have to sweat out whether Kyle Larson's going to have a problem or in comparison.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I just want to see Larson have maybe another one of those runs, especially because he's a low number anyway, before I want to even think of taking him. But I am happy, if I'm thinking about Larson, that he is at a respectable number, believe it or not, that 5-1 is respectable. And let's keep in mind too, that even though, like you said, he had won those 3 straight races, he swept 2017, he won the race in 2016, but he's only led over 7 laps 4 times at the track. That's it. And he's raced there 16 times. So he really hasn't, it's not like he also hasn't had and I know there's only 200 laps there, but it's not like he had one of those 180 laps out of 200 or, dominating performances. So it's been a good track for Kyle Larson. As you mentioned, the stats in the next gen have been solid. But again, this is what you're dealing with. You're not getting any value at 5-1, whereas Hamlin, this is a much better number. I know it's only a little bit more, but again, we're talking 6-1 is not bad for a driver who, as you said, has 7 straight top 10s at the track with 5 top 5s and 2 runner-ups, and he has 2 third-place finishes with next gen. And by the way, last year when he was on the pole and finished 9th, he had all sorts of trouble in that race and still finished in the top 10. And I mean, just amazing that he could do that with all the problems he had last year. Okay. What do you think should be next?
Byron. Okay. Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising. Okay.
Yeah, with Blaney, look, winning 2 in a row, we know what the deal is there, but this is a good track for Blaney. He's got the win just before next gen. And on the year, he's had 2 wrecks in the last 7 races. When he hasn't wrecked, he's had top 5s, including a win. And in this race last year, it's interesting, both him and Elliott, we'll talk about Elliott as well. If you just look at the finishing position, Blaney was 18th, 9th and 5th, the other 2, next gen. But he was 7th on the last lap. I think he must have ran out of gas, maybe, because I can't think of any other reason by him and Elliott dropped so much on the last lap because I didn't see the wreck. They just dropped back. So I think, and it was an overtime race. So I think they ran out of gas, which is the reason why he finished 18th. So in essence, he's got 3 top 10s really and 3 next gens. So keep that in mind. But again, it's real difficult to win back-to-back. Reddick, yes, he's got the win. But remember this. And by the way, he does have a win in the Xfinity Series at Michigan too, back in 2019. He is again, he's a streaky driver. He hasn't had a top 5 in his last 6 races. He did get back into the top 10, as we mentioned before last week. That was a good job, and maybe that's the start of him getting going again. So that's important to note. But last year when he won, that was a surprise. And it was a surprise for 2 reasons. One, it wasn't a Ford. And at that point, as we mentioned, they had dominated everything. But most importantly, 2, in his first 5 cup races, his average finish was 26.0. And then he goes out and wins the race last year. So,
yeah. The only bright spots, I guess, before his win last year were his 3rd place start in 2020 and his 6th place start in 2022. He did lead 7 laps in 2023, but like you said, maybe last week is the start of him starting to turn things around. He hasn't really been on it this season. Michigan, aside from that last win, which you talked about, was overtime and had some funky things going on at the very end. was kind of a steal. And by the way, Michigan is a track that is relatively smooth on tires. So you will see the ability of teams to go and do 2 tire stops to be able to make up some track position. So you'll see some strategy play out throughout the race, and that can jumble the order, which is probably why you get so many winners that are finished, not starting necessarily on the front row, unlike some of the other tracks. But then Ryan Blaney definitely makes sense to me being here. Obviously, he won last week, so he broke the seal, and he could go off and actually live up to the potential that he's shown all year now. Did lead 15 laps in this race last year, had a very solid record, has a very solid record in the next gen car, and then won that race, like you said, the last of the old generation before flipping to this new generation of car at this track. So this has been a good place for him. Penske's on the upswing, coming off of a win. There's a lot of confidence there. Winning back-to-back is still pretty hard. I probably would still choose Byron over both of these just for those 2 reasons, though Blaney would be my top choice over Reddick for sure.
Yeah, Blaney's, look, I think he would be an easy pick this week had he not won last week. Yep. Definitely. I think the only thing is winning back-to-back. That's it. But you are getting 7-1. And if it was Kyle Larson in the same shoes, he'd be 4-1. So again, yeah. So you're getting a good number if there's good value there. As far as Byron, yeah, I would guess he's next, right?
Has to be.
Okay. Maybe he's tied. No.
Not even tied. Wow.
Slightly below Bell. Yeah. This, look, I can get this, but this is interesting. First, Byron. You're right. I mean, I think Byron is the top plate right now this week, right as of today. The points leader hasn't won since the Daytona 500, so he's overdue. He has 7 top 5s on the season, including 5th and 2nd in the last 2 weeks. The next gen, as again we mentioned, 2nd last year in the race that he very nearly almost won. Probably could have and maybe should have. He also had an issue in the 2nd next gen race. Only lasted 46 laps, 12th before that. So he didn't really show anything next gen until last year. But pre-next gen in 2021, he was runner-up, led 18 laps. And so he does have 2 top 5s, both runner-ups in his last 4 races here. And then you have Bell. Here's the interesting thing about Bell. In next gen, his average starting position is 2.0. He's made 2 starts in the Xfinity Series. His average starting position is 4.5. He's never won a race at Michigan. And he's never had a top 10. And I mean, have you seen something like that with that kind of starting position? No top 10s?
No, best finish of 13th, which he's done 3 times in 6 tries. 2nd, 1st, and 3rd were his last starting positions at this track. He did crash out 2 of those 3 times. So absolutely, Christopher Bell can be competitive and probably should be. It's all about putting together the right strategy and making it to the end, and he just hasn't done that so far. Byron, though, with 2 runner-up finishes in the last 4. He's also got 1 other top 10 there in the previous generation of car. And by the way, he led 20 laps, and we talked about it. He was up there in the mix for the win right at the overtime period at the end of last season as well. Had things played out a little bit differently on the restart, probably would be talking about him as a winner. And I do think that he's overdue. I think he's been running pretty well. Still showing really good consistency and good speed at the front, which is why he's up there in the points. And I think it's, probably past due for William Byron.
Yeah. And I can't take Bell when you've got other options here. And the guy's never had a top 10 with this great starting position, even though we know based on the starting position that he's got speed here. So like you said, it's just a matter of time before they figure it out. And you know what? Just like Reddick last year, maybe it's this year for Bell, where no previous results, boom, win. We can see that. If you want to take them, hey, more power to you, but there are other options as far as we're concerned. So let's go ahead down the list. And then we got Chase Elliott, Chastain. Who else do we have here? Godwin, Busch. Okay. So Elliott, like I mentioned with Blaney, he was, let's see, where was he? He was in the top 10 going into the final lap in last year's race. Actually, he was 4th and he ended 15th. And he led 29 laps in this race last year. So that's more of the driver that really we saw, not the 15th. Now, if you look at it, he doesn't have a top 10, though, because of the way it worked out in pre-next gen. But before the next gen, 10 top 10s and 11 with 3 runner-ups. And they all happened in his first 3 appearances, which, of course, is crazy. But that's kind of interesting. But he is driving a Chevy, so there's that. And he only has 1 top 5 in his last 7 on the year, which is another reason, really, that I don't want to take Bell and say, all right, you know what, I'll go with him anyway, because Bell doesn't have a top 5 and he only has 1 in his last 6 too. So you got to throw in the fact of where are they right now as far as how hot are they. And Elliott just is not hot. He's still top 5, I believe, in points, but he hasn't been, and we've been saying it all year, he hasn't been leading laps anyway. As far as the rest of this group, Chastain, there are some things to like. He's led some laps in the next gen, but his average finish is 25.9 in 7 races. Kyle and Logano are the 2 that I would look at, because you're getting 14-1 on Logano and you're getting 18 on Busch. And with Logano, he's driving a Ford. And in his last 4 races, all of a sudden, Logano just look up and he's doing the best that he's had all season in Cup. He has 3 top 10s and 2 top 5s and a win in his last 4. He has 3 career wins in Michigan. He's led a lot of laps here, over 500, even though he hasn't led any in the last 5. And then Kyle, at least Kyle showed a little bit of progress last couple of weeks, top 15. So maybe this is a good top 10, top 5 week. And as you mentioned before, he had a good year last year, a good race last year. He had a strong car. He was there almost the entire race. I think the only reason that he dropped back, he finished 4th, which was once again, he got into that some of the late restarts and stuff. But he's had 10 top 10s in his last 12, 6 of those top 5s. And when he didn't get a top 10, he had crashes. So when he didn't get into any trouble, he had top 10s here at Michigan. And again, he's trending in the right direction. So those are 2 long shots. And I know they're not big long shots, but they're the top long shots so far that I would look at.
Logano and Busch, clearly the standouts out of this grouping. Logano, like you said, racing really well. He's a 3-time winner at this track. Busch, with 24 laps led in this race last year, ended up finishing 4th. He started 13th. I think this could be a turn in the right direction for him this season, because he's shown some speed. He's just not been able, to convert it into a full race finish. So I think Busch could probably come out and get a top 10 here. Chastain, yeah, his 1 top 10 is something to like. He's got some laps led, like you said, 2 starting spots in the last 2 races inside the top 10 as well. But aside from that, this hasn't really been the best track for him. Elliott has been very consistent at Michigan until the next gen car, though. So I wonder if the next gen car kind of threw off what Chase Elliott had at Michigan, because his worst finishes came since the new car was introduced, 11th, 36th, and 15th. And prior to that, he only had 1 finish out of 11 that was outside the top 10 at the track. So I think Elliott probably still coming up to speed and getting to grips with this car on this track. Lost a little bit of his edge. Chastain, probably would prefer him at other tracks. So Logano and Busch would be my 2 choices here. And if I had to choose between the 2, honestly, right now, I'd probably choose Logano, just because I think he's got a little bit more momentum on his side, a little bit better luck right now. Though I think this could be a good week for Kyle Busch, where we start seeing him turn things around. If he's going to, it's likely.
Oh, yeah. You're at that point where you got to start taking advantage of some of those little moments of progress, and he's got one of those. And because if not, time's going to start running out. Not as quickly as Max Verstappen, but We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, still. And the other thing that I don't like is the fact that Kyle Busch, the odds, honestly, I think you should be getting a little bit better than 18-1, or at least I don't think there's any reason at all that Joey Logano and Kyle Busch's odds should be that close together. Matter of fact, I think Logano's odds should be top on this list. So 12-1, maybe.
Certainly out of this grouping. Yeah. On this
page.
This
group. Yeah. Okay. Let's go through the next 4. And look at Carson Hocevar.
Starting to move up.
Yeah. Still hasn't won a race yet in his career, but he's 20-1. Briscoe had some momentum, and then it just went away last week. And now he's coming to a track, even though Truex was good in this race last year. It hasn't been a good track at all for Briscoe. Average starting position, 21.5. Average finish, 23.3. So nothing good there. But, hey, he's won 2 straight poles. So if you can go out and pole again, then maybe you got something. Unfortunately, you got to start off at 18-1, and that's not very low. So I would rather just wait, to tell you the truth, on that. Hocevar, again, he's down to 20-1 now, but he was 10th last year from the 11th, which is one of his better results, and he's red hot right now. The only question I have is I think it's one of those weeks where I think everybody is going to be looking at Carson Hocevar now, which is why his odds are down to 20-1. I don't like that situation. Most handicappers don't. When everybody jumps on a specific player or team that is not considered yet like a great player or team. They're like an up-and-comer, and that's kind of tricky. But, hey, you're getting 20-1. So I got no problem. Matter of fact, it's worth throwing a little bit of money on. Buescher at 25-1, the first of the 3 Keselowski Fords, and I think all 3 of them might be good to go with this week. Buescher, of course, won a couple of years ago, leading 52 laps. He only has 1 top 5 on the year, though. That's disappointing. But he also was 6th last year when he started 18th. And then you have Wallace, which I think is, once again, like last week. We said last week he was a good value play, 50-1, started the week, ended 6th place. Same thing. I know it's down to 28, but still I think we're in value territory because if you look at it, he's led laps in all 3 next gen. He started 11th or better in all 3, including a pole, was runner-up 3 years ago, and is coming in after his best finish of the year, 6th place last week. So, yeah, this is a tricky bunch, but I would probably say the best value might be Buescher of the 4.
I would agree with you. Chase Briscoe, nothing to talk about at Michigan. Definitely not at 18-1. Carson Hocevar, only the 1 race to go on. I'm still just, I got my eye on him. Been saying that for a couple of weeks, but I'm waiting until the second half of the season when we start getting to the tracks for the second time. I think that's where he really starts to shine, and he can start bringing some value. If you're going to pay 20-1, wait until second half of the season. Hopefully, he's not down to 15 or 12.
Better not happen without a win. Yeah.
Exactly right. Wallace is a closer for sure. The car's got a lot of power. This is a track where you need a lot of power. That's why he's able to get out front and lead laps. Like you said, he led laps at this track in all 3 of the last 3. Not so great finishes to back those up. So he's got to figure out how to get it to the end, just like he did last week, make the best of a situation, hopefully still be there up front if he makes no mistakes. But Chris Buescher, he has turned things around. This was not a great track for him. He only had 1 top 10 from 2016 all the way through 2022. But then in the last 2 races, he won it and finished 6th. And I think it's important to note, we've said it a couple times about Elliott and a couple of others, that this can end up being a fuel mileage race. We talked about tire strategy. You can do tire strategy. It's a long 2-mile track and requires a lot of horsepower in that drafting. So it could come down to a fuel mileage race. So you can see some things jumble up a little bit there. But I think that's probably good news for somebody like Buescher with RFK Racing in his Ford. Obviously, he was able to get it done in 2023, led 52 laps in his win at the track.
Maybe another reason to keep an eye on Logano if it's going to be a few miles race.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So, okay. Now let's see what else we got here. All right. Now we got Kozlowski again. And look, you're getting 28-1. So I actually think we're at the first time this season where I am considering taking Brad Kozlowski. So he has shown a lot more in the last 5 weeks or so than the entire early part of the season. He's never won here, so that is something to keep in mind. But he's got an average of 12th, which is pretty solid over 27 races. And then next gen, he has 2 top 5s in the last 2 years. He was top 5 all day last year in this race. And again, he had that restart that I mentioned at the very end that didn't help Byron's cause. Overall, though, 9 career top 5s, right on the number of 33% at this track. And you're getting a Ford at 28-1. So I think that this is not a bad week to go with Kozlowski for the first time. And yeah, I don't really see much else up with the other drivers, to tell you the truth. I think this is all Kozlowski here.
Yeah, I agree. And it's Kozlowski's home race, and he's never won it. He's not been shy about saying how badly he wants to win his home race in Michigan. He's done really well here throughout the years, just hasn't been able to make the breakthrough. He does have a couple of runner-up finishes. But like you said, 4th and 5th in the last 2 races here, led 15 and 2 laps in those races. He's just got to get the monkey off of his shoulders. This week, hopefully he's able to do it at his home track and come through. I think, again, if there is a place to choose Kozlowski so far this season, this would be it. It's his home track. He's in a Ford. It's a track that's been really good to Fords in the past, and his teammates have some good success, and he's had good success despite not making it to victory lane. So Kozlowski clearly would be the standout here. I think the other guys, Cindric and Barry, both 3 starts each. Cindric has the best finish of those 2 with a 12th place, but really nothing much to speak of among there. And then same thing really for Alex Bowman. He's got a couple of top 10s, but that's about it at this track.
Yeah, all 3 of them have average finishes in the 20s here. So not very good. Barry actually had a good career in the Xfinity Series at this track, but that has not translated so far. Okay, let's see what we got here. Wow, Gibbs at 45. Jones creeping up, deservedly so. Priest is a nice little option. And Suarez. I know we just went through a few that didn't really like most of them, but I got to say, I think all 4 of these drivers are interesting long shot plays. So you look at Gibbs at 45-1. You're getting a big number. His average starting, he's only been 3 Cup races. And his average starting position is 11th, and his average finish is 8th, including 3rd last year. He had a very good go at it last year, and he started 19th last year. That was his worst start. And he has a win in 3 Xfinity Series races. So good track for Gibbs. The only reason I would even consider him, since he hasn't had the greatest year and to expect him to win a race, it's asking a lot, is you are getting 45-1. Jones... Boy, legacy. I know Hunter Nemechek has kind of cooled down a little bit, but he's still having a better year than expected. And now all of a sudden, Eric Jones has turned things on with 3 top 15s in his last 4 races, 2 top 10s, 1 top 5. He does have 2 top 10s in 3 next-gen races. Keeping in mind that the last 2 races, he started 28th and 25th. So just imagine if he can get a good qualifying run going on Saturday. That would be big. Priest, meanwhile, his average start is 29th. His average finish is 18th. So that shows a little bit of something. Plus, he did have a top 10 back in 2019 when he started 29th. And he was 11th last year when he started 26th. So 2 drivers, both Jones and Priest, that if they can get off to a good start on Saturday in qualifying, they could be real dangerous, especially with the big numbers that they have. And Daniel Suarez at 90-1 has done nothing this year, but in 2 Xfinity Series races, he's got a win back in 2016. And he does have 2 top 5s in his career here. And throw in the fact that in 3 next-gen races, he's led at least 7 laps in all 3. 33 laps in 2022. And in the last 2 years, he's finished 6th and 8th. So I think all 4 of these long shots are live long shots.
The only one I would throw out that I'm not comfortable taking with or taking this week is really Ty Gibbs. And that's because just this season has not been good for him. We all know what potential he has. We all know that he's with Joe Gibbs Racing. We all would have expected him to have won a race by now. Hasn't, but it seems like this year he's even taken a step backwards. So I'm waiting for that to turn around for Gibbs. Maybe it could happen at this track because he's been really good here before. Jones has been very impressive, like you said, absolutely turning it on and stepping it forward. I've been impressed with Legacy Motor Club this entire season. Going back even to the Daytona 500, he had Jimmy Johnson that really had a standout run there as well, and that just set off the mark for the team as a whole through this entire season so far. So I look for Eric Jones to be in the top 10, top 15 again here. Ryan Preece probably is the one that stands out for me this one, just because he's been more consistent. Again, he's in an RFK Ford. We know how well Keselowski and Buescher have been doing here. So I think at 65-1 for one of those cars, especially Ryan Preece, with the way that he's been able to drive at times this year when everything's to his liking, I think he could be a very good standout. And then Daniel Suarez has not been bad at Michigan as well, finishing 6th and 8th in his last 2 races, leading 12 and 7 laps, and then 33 laps in the first year with the new generation of car at this track. So those 3 I think are all very interesting. I'm not sure you could go wrong with any of them. I'm just gonna put Gibbs aside only because of his poor season so far.
Yeah, and don't forget, you do have you can go top 10, you can go top 5. These are top 3 odds. So that's why these big numbers here, sometimes it happens. We saw it last week with Hocevar. These long shot drivers just don't have enough to win. But hey, they finish 2nd or 3rd. You can still capitalize on that. Okay. And as far as the rest of them, though, that's where we're going to have a drop because, we just can't have enough long shots. And I think we've exhausted all of them but one. And that is going to be Zane Smith at 100-1. Zane had one truck race in 2020 at Michigan, won. So he also finished 7th here last year in the Cup race when he started 27th. And let's not forget, last week was a decent week for him. Last year was a good week for him at Nashville at this time. I believe it was in June. But anyway, these good vibes going on right now with Zane Smith at 100-1. So he's like the only other long shot I would look at. Maybe I'd keep an eye on Stenhouse, who's a little bit further down here at 150-1. Just even though he doesn't have any numbers here over his career, just because I think eventually, and I said this on Saturday, I think that there are going to be some drivers like Zane Smith. You can't really do it too much anymore with Hocevar, but some of these drivers with these big numbers, that why not just throw a buck on them or whatever to every week? Because at some point they can go out and get a win. There might be a track where you go to, maybe it's a road course where you're going to throw, oh no, there's no way that those guys are going to win there or something like that. But for the most part, I think Stenhouse is in one of those zones, and maybe even Zane Smith, where I'm willing to throw a buck on him each week just in case.
I might even put John Hunter Nemechek in that conversation as well, just because he's been going pretty well. Zane Smith, 4 top 20 finishes of the last 5 races. So I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue this week at Michigan, the place where he did really well last year. And like you said, won the last truck race that was there too. So all pretty good to keep going with. Just a note on SVG. Next week we go to a road course. So expect his odds to be significantly different next week when we talk about him versus today.
Yeah, a little bit. And please don't get carried away with the odds next week. Please. Let's not go through one of those deals again. Shane Van Gisbergen, 3-1 to win Mexico. All right. You get the first pick. I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, William Byron.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and double down. Second straight week, I'll go with Denny Hamlin.
Good choice. I'll go Logano.
Yeah, Logano's a real good choice this week. I'm going to go ahead and take Kozlowski. I can't believe it, but I'm going to do it.
I'm going to take his teammate, Ryan Preece.
Okay. And that leaves one more, and I will take Eric Jones. So there you go. That is going to wrap it up. Now, again, next week is Mexico. Saturday, I'll be on the air for our starting lineup report. That's going to be usually a half hour after qualifying and practice ends. So I didn't go through it today. We did go through it last week, but what I'm talking about is we'll go over, past history of how practice speeds and qualifying speeds have affected these races. So we'll throw that into the mix with our starting lineup report. Obviously, we'll have better data when we see practice and qualifying, and then we'll be able to give you maybe even some updated new picks to chew on. But before we call it a show, since there's no F1, I don't know how many F1 fans are out there. I know we have all NASCAR fans if you're there. But for F1, it was kind of a crazy week last week. Just it was a big story because of what happened with Max Verstappen and whether or not that's going to kind of be the race that will end his season, which it's, again, this is the problem with F1 here in America, is when people say, well, Max Verstappen went from being like 40 points out to 49 points out, and that might be pretty much do it for him. And then you look at the calendar and it's June and we're not going to be done until December. It's a strange series for Americans to understand. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I know it by now, but not to understand, but probably accept. So anyway, what did you think about the whole Max Verstappen stuff?
It was wild. Trying to drive above, I think, what the car is able to give him, and getting frustrated, and the contact, and then pushing it even further with Russell. I think he was seeing the red mist behind his visor. I think he just got fed up and had it and made a heated decision in the position that he was in that ended up costing him pretty dearly. And he ended up dropping way down the order and really took a hit in the points as a result, and also got points on his super license as well. I think he's accumulated like 11 points, penalty points on his license coming up, which if you accumulate so many of those, you end up with a one race ban as well. So I think he's got to be careful. I think he's got to keep, we talk about it with NASCAR, like with an Eric Jones or John Hunter Nemechek, you've got to drive at the level that your equipment will give you. And a great driver can get the maximum out of that equipment, but if the equipment isn't there to put you in first place, you can't you can't always overdrive the car to get it there. And I think Max is very used to being able to overdrive the car to get it there, and the gap right now is just too much. And I think he was experiencing it with competitors last week in Spain that he hadn't been experiencing with it all season yet. I mean, he can expect it from McLaren, Piastri, and Norris, but to get it from Ferrari and Mercedes when he's had the measure of them so far this season, I think that all contributed to his frustration. So I think he's got to calm down. I think he's got to accept where the car is at and, try to get the most out of it, kind of like George Russell has been doing all season, where we know the Mercedes isn't as powerful and as good as Verstappen and the Red Bull or the McLarens, but yet Russell's been able to pull out some podium finishes pretty regularly. And I think Max Verstappen and Red Bull really at this point should seriously start considering 2026. That's going to be a wholesale rules change. The order is probably not going to change significantly from here till the next 6 months in December when we finally end. But rest assured, when we hit 2026 with the all new rules package, I think we're bound to be in for some surprises and some moves in the order. And perhaps that's the best opportunity for Max and Red Bull to be able to make up some of the ground that they've lost.
So when did McLaren start making up ground where people started really taking notice last year?
Miami of last year.
Okay.
Max Verstappen came out very early in the season and dominated the races. But then in Miami, Lando Norris was pretty close to him. Max Verstappen made a mistake. Norris got by and ended up winning that race. And that was really the start of McLaren's rise. Unfortunately for them, Max and Red Bull still was very competitive, and they were able to pull out points, and they got to the point where just from the sheer amount of points available versus what their initial lead had been from the start of the season, that it just couldn't be eclipsed. And yeah, it came down almost to the end of the season, but it was always going to be Max Verstappen. I think we're facing that same situation in the opposite direction now with McLaren, and Piastri is just starting to stretch his legs out front. I think he's got a calmer demeanor. The McLaren, still by far the best car that is out there over a full fuel run. Spain was and should have been a really good barometer as to where the competition stacks up. And I think we saw Ferrari step forward, and I think we saw McLaren step forward, and I think we saw Red Bull flounder, unfortunately, for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, as far as that race was concerned, it was a little strange to me. By the way, these are the futures. It was a little strange to me that their strategy, I didn't understand it, just to the point that when you start in third, you pretty much know the only chance you have is you have to, on the restart, you got to come in at second. And he did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like they had a strategy, but they didn't change it when he was in second. Because if you're in second, why did you go into this other strategy of pitting early and doing 3 pit stops and all that stuff? And why didn't you just go with what you were going with? And maybe because you even said that this track, a little bit better of an opportunity to pass. It wasn't like anything like Monaco. So were you surprised that they took that strategy after he found himself in second?
Yeah, actually I was, and probably speaking to the contact and the fact that he ended up, with a penalty and dropping back through the field, that's obviously the top story. But what put him in that situation and gave him the frustration is that bad strategy call, exactly like you said. They would have been better off staying out with the tires that they had and having that track position. I'm not sure exactly why they did it, but that shows you, I guess, the difference and impact in calling the right strategy, something that Mercedes rarely flounders on. Ferrari almost always flounders on. Red Bull hasn't made too many mistakes making strategy calls, but that has been McLaren's weak point as well. So with Lando Norris, they've made a lot of team mistakes, whether they be strategy errors or just mistakes in the pits. They've had more than their fair share of mistakes, which have held them back, but they've gotten their ship in order and they've been making the right calls on a consistent basis. Again, I think like Verstappen, getting frustrated and trying to drive over and above what the car will give, I think the team, from a strategy standpoint, may also be trying to outsmart themselves are outsmarting themselves by making the calls that they are right now in an effort to just kind of try something different to see if it works. And certainly last week we saw it end up hurting them. And I think that just compounded the frustration that Max had, put him in the position where he was getting passed by folks that he felt he shouldn't be getting passed by, and ultimately had a couple of collisions and some penalties as a result.
Before we end the show, I wanted to go through our viewer comments, and then we'll call it a week. Because we did not do the viewer comments, I believe, last week. I'm not sure if I know we did a couple of these, but some of these we didn't. We had that weird one with the Eric Estep video. I made a comment on the Eric Estep video, and then somebody came in and I guess they didn't understand what we were talking about. So it was just let's see. It was Casual Gamer. Haven't they tried multiple tire? I think maybe this was a different one. This was a different one. Haven't they tried multiple tire systems before in NASCAR? Why hasn't any attempt stuck? Because pit strategy plays a smaller role in F1 too, mainly tire choice. And then that's the one that you responded to, correct?
Yeah, NASCAR actually has tried multiple compounds within races. The first time they tried it was in the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, if I'm not mistaken, but they did actually do it in the points race this season at Phoenix. And I think we both enjoyed Phoenix a little bit more this year than we have in the past, but we also are highly suspicious that they would not do that again for the championship race.
Oh,
So,
no, please.
unfortunately, I'm not going to hold my breath for NASCAR to do that again, but maybe based on the success that I think we saw at Phoenix, I thought it was overall a better race with the better
Yeah,
strategy.
it was. Yeah.
I hope we see it at some tracks here in the future. NASCAR, if they do it, they're going to do it at a short track though, so it's not going to be at a place like Michigan.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be at crappy tracks where
Yep.
you're trying to just spruce it up somehow.
Yep.
At Strong Turf, great analysis. Just found your channel. I'll be at the race today, sitting front row in front of the finish line. So that is Strong Turf. So good to have Strong Turf along with us. By the way, Strong Turf also wanted to know, you have any idea what caused him to fail inspection? I can't seem to find any specific info on it. Still have 10 minutes left on your video. Oh, this was last, yeah, because I think we did talk about it then after because he made this comment before we ended the conversation.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah, I can't. No, yeah, I never found specifically what it was. Just multiple times they went through inspection and weren't able to pass, and then therefore, because you can't fail multiple times.
Who was that for again?
The penalties. I can't remember.
That was the yeah. Who were the two drivers that?
Yep.
Yeah, they were like second and third or something. Yeah, remember? Yeah, I forget which race was that they were second and third, and then you found out that they went to the back.
It was like 2 weeks ago. We can't possibly remember that far back.
Yeah, right. And I just remember the first thing that popped into my head when that happened was just imagine if they would have finished in first place.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that would drive me absolutely crazy if I had that driver and that had happened to me. Lana, when did Lana say this? Lana said this just popped in just about 10 minutes ago. Excellent. Great that you had an opportunity to check us out live, Lana. And yes, always great to see Blaney win a race. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And always good to have one of our top viewers
and
chime in with us.
She was right with the AI. So whatever AI you're using, Lana, to make it a better fan experience, definitely last year was hot at Nashville. Obviously, you felt it when you were there this week. I hope you had a good time.
Okay, let's see. P-Man85. Oh, no, that's another one. That was an older one. Let's see, what else do we have here? Because we have some are a little bit old. I got to get these out of here. Let's see. This one from Lana. I don't remember when you said this, Lana. It's a great show. You sounded. This is when last week when I had to go. This was before the Coke 600 when I went with Reddick as my top choice. She says you sounded thrilled going with Reddick with a little laughing emoji. So yeah, that was one of those deals where, CJ took the top pick and that was the pick I wanted. And you saw what happened. I don't like taking Reddick, even though he had a strong car that day. He just didn't have it, whatever it was. And I think what it is that when they don't have anything else working for you. So when you're hot, everything's going great, and you find yourself in the top 5, well, chances are you might find yourself winning a race. So I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. And last one, Wayne Billow. I know we haven't heard from Wayne in a while.
Yeah.
Wayne Billow, another great show. Loved you and CJ on Thursday. Have a great race. And following you guys have sure made my picks worthwhile. Thanks. So yeah, good to have Wayne commenting once again. We are going to be adding a membership, a YouTube membership to the channel. It could be as early as this week, and also a Patreon, which could be coming up in the next week as well. Now, I do not believe at this point in time there are going to be anything significant as far as motorsports. What could occur, though, is when CJ and I decide to do one of those live shows during a race, that might go on there. So because we're going to have bonus content of some sort on the Patreon. But what we'll try to do is if we do something like that, we're just not going to stick like one video on there and then say, well, that's a one for the year. We'll make sure that we'll have some additional bonus content of some sort. So if you do pay for it, even though it's going to be extremely inexpensive, we're looking at, some $2, $3, $4, $5 type of monthly, memberships just to get involved. So anyway, we'll update everybody accordingly. Like I said, I don't really believe motorsports is going to be impacted a whole lot. But hey, if you're a listener, a viewer, and you participate here on NASCAR shows, as well as some of our other shows for the other sports, we'll check that out because that might come into play, especially football for sure. If you're a football fan as well as a NASCAR fan, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our future Patreon show membership, because we're going to include a weekly contest in there, and that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be worth your while. Anyway, CJ, rotowire.com, no F1 this week. So they're in Canada in 2 weeks. So that means that or next week. So that means you are just going to go with the Michigan RotoWire report that should be available by Friday.
You got it. We'll try to put the Michigan preview for best picks from a DraftKings perspective, as well as some wagers in there. We'll get that up on Friday, and then also on rotowire.com Monday after the race. We'll have a recap, kind of try to change the barometer into kind of a power ranking type of format. So we'll see how that goes next week. Might want to check in, but we'll have the links for you in the description of the video.
All right. Sounds good, CJ. Appreciate it as always. Next week, Mexico. Wow.
Exciting.
Road course.
So,
yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how the cars perform.
By the way, what should we look at do they have races from other series that we can find on YouTube to check it out?
Formula One races there, IndyCar race there a long time ago, but the current configuration is Formula One.
So even this year?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll check that out. And they've never, of course, had anything close to a stock car at this track before.
They do have a Mexican division for NASCAR. So I'm sure that they've raced there before. I've not seen any of those races. IMSA races there as well. So you get sports cars often. I think touring cars may have gone there in the past as well. It's an international track. There's a little twisty bit that kind of goes through an old baseball stadium as well. Makes it a little bit interesting, but it's very high elevation. It's very flat, and it's got a really long front straightaway. So it'll be interesting to see how this race goes.
So it's not going to be like, what's that road course where you have that initial turn that wiped out Chase Elliott a few months ago on the first lap? Which one is that?
Where was that?
Yeah, which one is that? You see, if anybody's ever watching live and we're stumped by some of these questions, you got to let us know if you know the answers to it.
Was it the Circuit of the Americas race?
Sounds good to me. There were only two road courses, right? Texas and what was the other one?
Americas was one.
Yeah.
Did we have another road course? I think that was the only one. So
that's it?
Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah, that was the only one.
Okay. So then there you go. That's it. So that was the one that Christopher Bell won. Okay. Yeah. So Elliott still finished fourth in that race. That was the one when he came all the way back and finished fourth. Yep. And he get wiped out in that first turn, and it took him the entire race just to get back into it.
Yeah, and they cut off the long section of the track this year, so they changed the configuration to make the lap a little bit shorter. They had a really tight turn in order to come off of what was the back straightaway coming off of the S's, cut off kind of the back section of the track, which actually helped the racing. But yeah, I think Mexico is going to be very interesting to see how they all get through turn one with that long straightaway. I think they're going to be in one.
So it's going to be a long straightaway, and then they're going to be going into a turn.
You got it. A right-hand turn into some kind of little S's before they come out again and loop on all the way back to the baseball stadium and then back to the front straight again. It's an interesting track.
So and we'll talk all about this next week, but your guess, you think it's going to work?
I think it'll work. Yeah.
Okay.
As long as the driving standards are there and it doesn't become a demolition derby, I think it'll work.
Well, if I'm Carson Hocevar, I'm watching out for Ricky Stenhouse next week.
Yes.
So anyway, and who was it that knocked Elliott out of that race? Was it Chastain? Who was it that knocked him out of that race? I can't
Remember.
remember.
Yeah.
Whoever that was, Chase Elliott, I'd watch out for him in this one. Anyway, that's next week. So for CJ, we're doing our Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in here to our NASCAR coverage on Proline TV. And for the rest of the week, we'll have football coverage for sure. We're also going to have horse racing coverage. We have the Belmont Stakes coming up, the last leg of the Triple Crown. And then don't forget, on Monday, we're going to have our live U.S. Open preview for the biggest major of the season in golf. So check out all of this coverage, a lot of it being live here on Proline TV. So don't forget to subscribe. That's the best way to support the channel. And we'll see everybody again